speakers and guests. Title of my speech is Eat Your Greens, but as I said, nothing to do with veganism. It could just as easily been called Make Do and Mend or Dig for Victory. Have you heard the quote, the past is a foreign country, they do these things differently there? Yes, the post-war years were indeed a different country, an age of austerity, make do and mend and recycling. I was born into that foreign country in 1946, and as I grew up I absorbed its culture. I ate what I was given, and because I played outdoors all day and worked up a good appetite, I never needed to be told to eat my dinner up. Back in those days we did not snack between meals. Fast food was a biscuit or an apple. A takeaway, although it wasn't called that, was a local chippy. My mother boiled potato peelings on the ideal boiler to make feed for our chickens. Schools had pig bins, and glass drink bottles were always recycled. We lived simply and believed, and so my mother would always tell me, we had never had it so good. When I was young, I was taught to sew and darn. Perhaps this was because I was a bit of a tomboy and I was always climbing trees, making dens, with playing cowboys and Indians with the boys and ripping my dress. Then when my children were little, I set myself transformation challenges. If you haven't heard of this, it's a term used on the Great British Sewing Bee, which last night actually was on this subject, so I'm really chuffed about that. But anyway, I set myself challenges. I made clothes and soft toys from material which I got from jumble sales. Once I made my son a glove puppet, a Womble glove puppet. It's from dark grey material, and he called it Dirty Womble, and he was never very keen on it. It wasn't original. My husband grew veg on his allotment, and he upcycled before the word was popular. I did put originally invented, but I don't know when it was invented. He even converted our old bedroom furniture into a bespoke wall unit for our living room. As a family, we picked blackberries for crumbles or pies. We made wine with what we could forage from the hedgerows. I once made rosehip syrup for my children. This was not a good idea. It fermented in the cupboard and exploded all over the place. That was not a good idea. In many respects, I still live in the 50s and adhere to many of its customs and beliefs. For example, I still boil meat bones and carcasses for stock. I find inventive ways to use up leftovers, and I search the charity shops for bargains. I just hate throwing away anything which I think can be reused. I believe that just as our parents, or maybe our grandparents, lived through the Second World War and then faced an age of austerity and rationing, we too face difficult days ahead. The COVID pandemic has cost our country dearly, both in the lives that have been lost and in the economic hardship that we are facing. Yes, we are at the brink of an energy crisis, and many are struggling with poverty. That's why I firmly believe we need to learn lessons from the past, namely to reduce, reuse, recycle, upcycle, eliminate waste, live more simply, and be thrifty. There are many reasons why it is imperative that we do so. Basically, we could put them under three headings: environmental concerns, economic necessity, and for our own physical and mental health. The state of the environment and saving the planet have been uppermost in the minds of many of us for some time, but we also face I have a struggle over this word. We always face an obesity crisis, and I've been saying it lots of times before coming in. I was reading an article when researching for this that compared the nation's health after the war with that of today. And it seems that despite all the medical advances that have enabled us to live longer, and the better understanding that we have about the dangers of smoking, sugar, salt and saturated fats, we are not actually as fit and healthy as we were as a nation in the 1950s. We need to ask ourselves, what can we as a society do? I suggest teaching our young people how to live simply and responsibly, and promoting awareness of the situation. This is just the start. I would also like to see manufacturers supplying drinks in glass bottles that can be reused, and designing and producing things, especially electrical goods, which can actually be repaired. I could have lots more ideas that I would like to tell you if time allowed, and if there was time for a discussion on this subject. But time moves on. But what about each of us in this room? Are there any lessons which we could learn? Maybe, perhaps, to start to grow your own vegetables and get an allotment. Maybe, I don't know how many of you do cooking. I know that lots of men do cooking just as much as women nowadays, but I notice that we do have an excess of men here, so maybe there should be a message just as much for your wives or partners. But what about using the leftovers? And what about making your own burgers for the children instead of ordering a McDonald's? And not throwing out clothes simply because they've gone out of fashion. And maybe we could rediscover old skills, not just culinary ones, but sewing and mending. There are also many things we could do even if we lacked skills. Maybe not use the tumble dryer so much to dry our washing, but go back to putting them on the washing line and bringing them in. And my mother, I always remember her, when we got undressed at night, taking our clothes and sponging off all the little marks off of the jumpers and the skirts and items which she didn't want to put in the washing machine. We face an energy crisis. We need to think of how we use our things such as washing machines. I'm aware that many of you may be patting yourself on the back. Well, I'm hoping in a way that you are, and thinking, well, she's preaching to the converted. Well, maybe there's not a lot more that you can do as an individual, but what about passing on this message and encouraging others? Putting a link or telling others about the YouTube if it is going to be recorded. But on the other hand, you may be thinking, I'm financially secure and happy with the way I live, and this message is not for me. Well, all I can say is, we are all entitled to our own opinions. I am just so sorry that my S3 speech has not convinced you. Perhaps I needed a little longer to do a little more research, or just be that little bit more persuasive.